For some reason, I came here during the week, and it seemed like it was like a lot longer of a drive. I thought that it was like an hour and 40 minutes forever, but then I looked today, and it was like 35 minutes.
LA traffic, man, is always packed. You know how it is over here, so.
Yeah, you've been hanging on to these for me for a while. Want to go through them?
Yeah, of course, man. So I got your Sparkster right here. Got a Battletech, Doom, and your Fire Shark all complete in box, so, you know.
You said 470?
470, man.
My name is Edward Payson. I'm a filmmaker in Burbank, California. Something was missing in my life. Right, I was in California, I was making movies, I was making commercials, I had lots of friends, I was doing the things I thought that I wanted to do, but something seemed like it was missing, and I realized that it was retro video games. So within 1 year, I went from just wanting anything I could get my hands on retro video game related to really focusing on Sega Genesis. And then by 2 years, I was deciding that I wanted to collect the entire Genesis collection. And then from the entire Genesis collection, I didn't just want the Genesis collection, but I wanted prototypes, I wanted sealed games. And from there, you just keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Where it ends, I don't know. But at this point, I just directed a horror movie about a haunted Sega Genesis game, and now I'm directing the documentary that you're watching right now about retro game collecting. So you can say that I'm all in at this point. The question I ask myself is, what is this overwhelming feeling of nostalgia, and do other people get this? Is this a unique thing?
When people are going through difficult moments, I think we tend to latch on to those comfort foods. And by that I mean those comfort video games.
A box.
It's like a microwave. You're reheating leftovers, right? It's like, you know, nostalgia is the leftovers that you remember it being so good, it was such a great meal, but it's never going to be as good as it was when you first had the meal. But it was so good that you do want to keep having it over and over again. The leftovers are very good.
Nostalgia is such an interesting thing to me because so many people place it in different categories. And sometimes people will ask me, what is nostalgia? And the best way I normally explain it to people, I start going, well, hold on, let me ask you a few questions. And I kind of start describing moments in their life, in their past. And if they go, yeah, I remember that, and it was pretty cool, I'm like, okay, I don't think that's nostalgia yet. And I dig deeper. What about Saved by the Bell? What about Ninja Turtles? What about Skip It? What about this old toy? And once in a while, when you have those conversations, you'll see someone like the light switches, and they're like, oh, that. And then you're not asking them questions, and all of a sudden they're going off. They're rambling. They have so much to say. They're laughing. They're smiling. And I'm like, what? That's nostalgia. Nostalgia to me is those things that were special in your past, where it's not just a memory. Like, yeah, I remember I did this one time. It's like, hey, I did this, and oh my gosh, let me tell you about it. I feel like it's almost like your brain has created your nostalgia for you. It's not something that you can kind of pick and choose what you're nostalgic for. It's something that you're passionate about because somewhere along the line in your past, you were excited about something and it means something to you now. And it really is something that you kind of really can't recreate or even try to create.
Nostalgia for me definitely brings me back to when I was younger, when I didn't ache as much as I do, you know, pre-arthritis, stuff like that, before I had responsibilities, before I had a full-time job. Nostalgia brings me back to a time when my dad literally went to go to probably Montgomery Ward or something back in the day to pick up the Atari 2600, and it blew my mind. I remember literally asking my mom the question, so that has Pac-Man on it and I don't have to use quarters? I mean, I couldn't wrap the concept. I loved the arcades at the time. Every time we go to an arcade, gas station, pizza place, grocery store, there'd be arcade games everywhere, or the arcade in the mall. But just the idea that I could have video games at home that didn't look the same as the arcade, but they were still just as fun to me. And I didn't have to use quarters on them. That was great for me.
I've been collecting games for a long time. Ever since I got my first Commodore 64, I've been a bit of a pack rat because I love playing all games of all generations. And so technically been collecting since the early 80s.
My dad and I were hardcore collectors back in the day. We used to collect everything under the sun for video games. I mean, you name it, Nintendo, Sega, Atari. It was crazy in my house. We just had so many games, and my dad especially was such a fanatic. He was the one on top of every little detail, every new system launch, everything, and he recorded everything that involved games. When they came into our house, Dad was there with the camera ready to record.
Well, it's the next morning, and Tyler's still playing Mega Man.
20, 22, 23.
Wow, 23 games?
Yeah.
Wow, you must be proud.
So I specifically remember many times, many instances where Dad would come home with a video game in hand.
It's bubble cage! Where's the cage?
He loved surprising. He loved the art. I call it an art because there is an art to surprising somebody with something. And for him, it was surprising me with video games for sure.
The reason I wanted to go back and play these old games and collect them, at the time, it wasn't really nostalgia yet. I just kind of was like, man, I like those games. They're just like, I had a deeper connection with them. I had a more intimate experiences playing with them. I thought they were just more well-made games, like core gameplay. But as time went on, I grabbed more NES games here and there. I started developing nostalgia for the early days because as I got older, you get more distant from those memories, and then you start to connect certain games with certain people you played them with back in the day, like your friend down the block.
I'm James Rolfe from Cinemassacre. I like making movies. People know me as the angry video game nerd. I started collecting games ever since my 8th birthday, but it wasn't really, collecting per se. I suppose, you get a game for your birthday or for Christmas, and a lot of times I'd rent games. I was mostly renting games from the video store. Can't recall exactly what was my first system, but it was probably Atari 2600. I was born into it. It was my grandpa's or my aunt's or somebody's. I don't remember who actually bought it originally, but it was there when I was born. So I played Atari at a very young age. And then at some point during all that, I remember playing the Odyssey 2 with my cousin. The nerd started out as just a simple joke. I had no idea it was going to go this far. Because the whole joke was, oh, remember these old video games? Like, hey, nobody's talking about the things in these games that suck.
Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. It makes no fucking sense. It's like, what were they thinking?
That's what was funny about it. That's what I thought. It was just, who the hell would want to talk about these old games? Who even remembered these games? I totally underestimated that. I just didn't know it would catch on as much as it did. As soon as the nerd kicked off, then collecting came back into my life because then I started seeking out these games so that I can make videos on them. This is the background that completes the picture, so collecting has a whole new purpose for me. And then people made it easier because the fans would donate games a lot. So this is a graded Jekyll and Hyde that's graded 90. A fan gave this to me. I mean, there it is. It's in my collection. It's just funny to always have this reminder that people will go out of their way to get you something like this because it must have made an impression on them.
If you look at what's popular in the market or what's expensive in the market, it's usually when the target demographic for whatever system turns about 30 years old. And so that's like when you have in a lot of people's lives, it's the first time that they have really solid kind of disposable income, maybe don't have children yet, maybe don't have larger responsibilities like homes. And so they're really then able to start funneling their liquidity into a hobby. And around that same time, they get really nostalgic for their childhoods.
What do we care about, right? We care about pop culture, especially in America. Like, it's so American. It's Americana. Like, having physical products, it was capitalism. I mean, 70s, 80s, 90s, think of how many toys came out, how many actual physical products. And us now trying to actually get that stuff back is a representation of preserving culture. Preserving the culture that matters to us, the culture that we grew up with. In fact, there's a lot of young kids who are educated about retro games, and they're learning on YouTube because the games they played and the stuff they're growing up with today, they want to know the origin.
So physical media is something that I think is kind of dying away a little bit because minimalism is really in right now, and I think people want to just be able to have like more of a clean look. You know, you see these streamers and people that are playing games and they have like this whole entire area that's just so put together and there's barely anything on the table. And, you know, everyone kind of thinks of like a retro gamer or a collector as messy almost. But for somebody who's a collector, I want to collect the physical media. Like I want to have the case with the game inside of it so I can just know it, hug it and hold it. And that's just kind of how I am.
For me, it's the difference between listening to Spotify or putting on an old vinyl record. If you put on an old vinyl record, you're gonna listen to that one, the whole thing with all the tracks, because it takes time and effort to actually change it, and you made an effort putting it on. When you browse through Spotify, you can skip in the middle of a song or, oh, not that one, and you just skip through. It's more accessible that way, and sometimes you might prefer having it that way, but there is a charm in actually engaging in the media. For me, you know, putting on a cassette tape on the Commodore 64 where you have to wait for 30 minutes before the game even loads, I'm not going to turn that off after 2 minutes because it was a boring game. I'm going to give it my all.
I think collecting physical media is important because when you are buying a digital product, you are not actually buying the product. You are buying a license to operate that product.
When you only have digital content, at some point, that work is going to disappear. It's inevitable. I believe it is up to the manufacturers and developers to at least give the modern day consumer the right to have physical form of those games so that we can protect that work. There are a lot of people that put their hearts and soul into those things, musicians, developers, electrical engineers. I mean, the list goes on of lives that have gone into that game. So if we don't keep a physical copy of that, you know, it's all gone.
Anybody can like scroll through their digital library, but I love walking by my shelves and looking at the physical media. And I also, you know, we come from a time where you get the game and you open it and you flip through the manual. And I mean, that's what I do like before I would play the game. Now games don't even come with manuals and it's so sad.
It's like one of the biggest catastrophes of the modern age really is no manuals because they are pretty helpful.
Back then I put tons of time, tons of energy, tons of love into getting a box, opening it, smelling it, feeling it, reading these guides, these books, the video games. Oh, look at the characters. Look at this manual. It's telling me every character's name. Everything in my mind is vivid, even looking back at consoles, old boxes. When you see Super Nintendo boxes now, they're bright. There's so many video games on the back. They're showing you 20 video games on the back of the box. Check this out. This game's coming. This is coming. This is coming. Play it loud. Everything's crazy.
I wouldn't recommend to the common person to fill up an entire room in their house of video games or movies or anything, which is what I do. I mean, we all have our own personal reasons for doing it. It's more of it's a niche thing. So, I mean, nobody does this because this is the thing to do. We just do it because we want to in some way or another. And we may all have our different reasons.
I think a lot of collectors prefer finding a game in the wild as opposed to buying it online because those particular collectors are in it for the thrill of the hunt. There's something maybe in them where they are adventurers like Indiana Jones and they're out to find the lost Ark of the Covenant.
It always feels the most satisfying when you find it in person, and especially if you get to interact with the person who you bought it from. And of course, it's a lot more special. Those moments are more rare for me nowadays.
I love going game hunting. I love going to garage sales, pawn shops, thrift stores, retro gaming expos, looking underneath tables and behind the counter and just looking for those really obscure and cool games that no one has seen before or maybe I'm finding for a really good deal. It's the thrill. It's awesome.
And that is basically how I was when I was growing up with Dad. Every time we'd go out to a department store, some old department store or a pawn shop, we would be on the search. It was like, department stores and pawn shops and these places, yard sales, these were our tombs. These were our catacombs. And we were Indiana Jones searching for lost relics. And that was what was so appealing about it to us. And we'd find them too. I mean, we would find really cool stuff back in those days. I'm talking the 90s and early 2000s.
Swap meets and flea markets being so prominent in my life, I think is a lot accredited to my dad and the way he raised us. We grew up at a time in our life when we were younger with a lot of money. And then a lot of bad things happened in my dad's life, and we took this big turn for growing up with no money. To the point where, as embarrassing as it is to say, I remember one Christmas going through trash cans with my dad behind a Kmart to find toys for my brother. And since then, my dad has bounced back and life's been good, but ever since then, those old days of finding things and looking for things, my dad kind of got into swap meets and flea markets, and I would find myself complaining, I don't want to walk around, I don't want to pick up this junk. But when I got into junior high and high school, I started being like, I want to go to swap meets and flea markets. And it wasn't even necessarily video games back then. I just think that's where I started to find my love for collecting things and getting items that are used and finding the deals.
I think anyone who looks for rare things, I mean, I remember my grandfather going to swap meets looking for old Winchester pieces. When you find something that isn't being sold by someone who knows what it is, you're hunting. And the thrill of the hunt is that unexpected moment when you see something that you shouldn't see, that shouldn't be there. Even though you're looking for it, you can't believe that you're actually looking at it. But I think there's also just a rush. There's a rush to going out having no expectation that you're necessarily going to find anything, and then when you do, it's a story to tell. But I've never heard someone say, man, I have this really great story. I bid at the last minute. I bid $100 more than just in case, and I got it. I mean, that's not a very compelling story. So maybe it's the storytelling aspect that we want to have a good story. We want to have high points in our life, and finding something in the wild provides some of those high points.
As far as my craziest pickup story, I was at an event about 5 hours away from my house. A person came walking up to me and they asked me if I collected video games, considering I have video games running down my leg. And I said, absolutely. And they said, we have a lot of that stuff for sale. I said, well, I'm here with somebody and I don't really have a car. I guess I'll take a chance. If you want to drive me to your place, I'll be glad to take a look at it. So I jump in the car with that said person. And I'm now about 45 minutes away from where I was, which is about 5 hours away from where I live, without a car. I'm in the middle of the woods, and I walk into a truly bizarre situation. I walk in to cocaine-addicted swingers who are looking to have a good time. And when I looked down on the ground, I saw about $3,000 of games in one corner, $3,000 of games in another corner, and luckily I walked out of there unscathed, and I made a deal, and I got probably $20-something thousand worth of games for $2,000. But it was the scariest damn thing I have ever walked into in my entire life.
One of my favorite finds ever at a swap meet in the wild looking for video games was at a swap meet in Orange County. I was with my buddy Ricky, our cameraman Chris, and we were just cruising down the aisles, not really in filming mode. We weren't really in the spirits of filming. We were just walking. And Chris and Ricky walked past this one booth with electronics, I would say, had car batteries, some tools, some routers, Ethernet cables, kind of cable equipment. And they walked by it, and I kind of just glanced over, and I'm like, it was one of those days where I'm just like, I don't know, I'm gonna look. There's gonna be nothing here, but I'm gonna look. And on the end of the table was a PC core engine, basically a TurboGrafx, just sitting there. And I looked around and I'm like, there's no way this place knows that this is what it is. I grab it, I hold it up. It was early on, let me make that clear, and I'll tell you why in a sec. I hold it up, how much is this? And they go, what is it? And that's the fine line when you're doing this, because you don't want to lie, you don't want to undercut people, you don't want to be a sleazeball. I admit it was early on. I was overly excited. I just held it up and kind of nodded again when they said, "What is that?" I go, "This." And they go, "The router, $2." And I was just like, "Okay. God forgive me, please. No, don't go to hell, please." And I just walked over, gave him the $2, had Ricky and Chris roll the camera.
The person I think thought it was like a car battery accessory, so I am like super, super excited about this. I never see these ever.
How wonderful.
Ever out in the wild.
This thing right now is like $175 at the current time of filming this. For $2, one of my favorite finds, a funny find, a find that was really valuable, and I have to admit, I did feel a little weird years later, like, oh, I kind of got this, the wrong way. And I actually ended up giving it to one of our first subscribers on our old YouTube channel because I was like, that'd be kind of cool. One of the first people that ever supported us. Let me put this demon product in their hand and they can go to hell for it.
So the story of Kuon is a long and treacherous one for me.
So much pain.
Yeah.
So much misery.
There's a lot of history here. I have always been a PS2 guy. I've always been a horror guy. Back in the day, GameStop had a buy two, get one free PS2 game, so I essentially got this game for free. And I played it. I loved it. It sat in my collection for a while. I went through some crazy purge thing where I got rid of a bunch of games that I was like, I'm probably not going to play this again, whatever it may be. Fell out of collecting for a hot minute. Recently, past handful of years maybe, the game skyrocketed in price. A few years back it was maybe $300, went up to $4. I was like, great, now I'm never going to get my hands on this game. Then at a birthday party of mine, I had a bunch of people over my house, and we're all just kind of hanging out, and I walk into the kitchen, and there is an artless case on the counter, and I open it, and there's this copy of Kuon on my kitchen counter. Nobody there fessed up to bringing it over. We have no idea how it got there, so I'm not convinced that this isn't cursed to some degree. I think the game's up to $700 to $1,000 on eBay is what I'm seeing it for.
For a single PS2 game.
Single PS2 game.
It's incredible, and it is. Yeah, I've played that copy a few times, and I've had nightmares regularly after. Yeah. So I do believe it's cursed.
It's a great game.
These two games, they are not necessarily like niche rare or anything like that. They're just like retail releases. Like every guy who has like a big collection usually has Chip 'n Dale 2 and Kid Clown. When I got back into collecting for a second time, I had a kind of a stroke of beginner's luck, and I like went to the flea market like pretty like early on, like a month or two into like getting back into game collecting. And I was walking on the flea market and I was about to go home, and then some guy who like was just selling like junky tools and stuff like that, and like some guy that I never would have imagined be having video games on his table, just started laying these games out one by one on the table, but like face down, so you couldn't read any of the labels. And I walked up as he was doing this, and he had like a bunch on the table, and I was like, hey man, like, what's going on with this? How much? And he's like, oh, I don't know, man. He had a $3 price tag on each, and he's like, yeah, $3 each, man. Like that's, and I was like, okay, cool. And I like pick up the first one, and I was like, oh, Kid Clown. I picked up the second one, and I was like, oh, Dog Kong Junior Math. And I picked up another one, and I was like, oh. And like my adrenaline shot through the roof. And then I was like, hey man, $40 for all? And he was like, yeah, sure. I raked them all into a garbage bag that he was holding, 2 garbage bags. And I just like ran out of the flea market. Like I like ran, like fucking, probably looked like a maniac. I was like, oh my God. Got back to the car and just started sifting through the ones that I couldn't actually see because they were all facing down. And I was like, oh shit, like, Chip 'n Dale 2, oh, there's other ones, and they're like Pugsley Scavenger Hunt, like Wampa, blah, blah, like it's like all these like good, uncommon to rare games. This is a copy of Action 52, tying into my previous story about some beginner's luck of my round 2 of collecting. I think one of like the second or third garage sales I went to at like 5 p.m. on a Friday or something, I saw the clear cartridge of Action 52, and I like knew immediately what it was because of my previous knowledge from like 10 years ago or something, but I was like, holy shit, that's Action 52. Got the cartridge for $1. I could show you the cartridge. I'm sure everybody's seen this game, but for the sake of being thorough. So I got this cartridge for $1 in a lot of 10 games. I later acquired the box and manual just from trading some guy in Chicago, some other stuff that I had just to complete it. But I don't know, that's my story of beginner's luck. Like, that's like a true wild find for like an actually rare game. Like Action 52, I don't know how valuable it is per se these days, but as a loose cart, like, it's actually legitimately rare.
All right, these are some of my more expensive items. This is the famous Stadium Events game, complete in box. It's not in beautiful shape. It's in a label-less WATA holder. I guess that's the benefit of working at WADA is having some protective cases. And I also have the spare cartridge, which this is the cartridge that I found this when I really started collecting early on. It was a lot of about 150 games, and they were $2 a piece. And the guy said, "Man, there's something really rare in here," but I didn't know what it was, and I didn't find out until I got home. And I'd read something about there was a PAL version, and I was like, "There's no way." And I went down and looked at the computer, and lo and behold, this was the one. So I was young. I was known on the forums then as the kid who found stadium events.
I died and went to heaven.
What happened?
I will never forget this day in my life.
bakayım sana. Huh? Tell me.
I can't. There's
What?
too much.
What?
To tell.
What is that? Crap.
It's the whole back.
It's full?
Filled.
And there's some real neat stuff here that is very good.
I could probably sell all this for like $7,000.
What?
8,000.
Get out.
No exaggeration whatsoever.
Wow.
None at all.
The cartridge in here is actually nicer, and I would sell that over this one any day because of how much this one means to me.
I had started to get back into retro games sort of circa like 2005 to 2008, and there was I couldn't really go places and just like buy games. Everything I was buying was off of like eBay or something like that, so there wasn't like any real like brick and mortar stuff around me. When I came to Japan, there were just so many like dedicated game shops, thrift stores, everything like that, especially in Tokyo, really densely populated area, lots and lots of video games, so it became like way easier for me to actually just go take a drive down the street, go to a hard off or something, and then come home with like, bags full of games. When it comes to looking for retro games in Japan, especially a place like Tokyo, it's kind of like looking for sand at the beach. They're just like everywhere. But if you go to a thrift shop like Hard Off, you can go into their junk bins and just find, PlayStation games, Famicom games, Super Famicom, all this stuff like 100 yen a piece, which I think with the exchange rate right now is like 94 cents. I think you'd be really hard pressed to find a game store, a brick and mortar game store in the US where you can go and just find like 94-cent games that aren't like, Madden, whatever year that was or something like that. People like locals just, dropping off all their old games they don't want anymore, and then they just throw it in the bin and put a 100-yen sticker on it. Like you can walk in with, $50 and walk out with like huge stacks of games. Maybe it's something specifically cultural about Japan. It's a very common comment on some of the videos I do with game hunting is people remark how it's so awesome that all those games are still boxed, and how the boxes are still in good condition, and how the manuals and everything is still in good condition. Obviously, somebody really cared about this, and they really took good care of it. It ties into like a history of like Shintoism in Japan, where you can have like an attachment to like something. Like it's my understanding that in Shinto, like even something like a doll can like develop a soul if you attach like enough emotion and attachment to it. Or maybe like there's a certain soul that's connected to like a piece of art because of the emotion that like you attach to it. It compels people to take better care of things like that you could put in like an artistic context. You could argue that, okay, this box is a piece of art. This manual is a piece of art. The cartridge itself, all of this, the game inside is all art. So, I don't know, maybe there is something cultural here that creates that kind of attachment, that people want to take better care of things.
Looking at other cultures, video games was art and culture and respected and revered. I think we're finally seeing that in the United States. For the longest time, we had the boomer generation, nothing against them, but they typically didn't grow up with video games. And this generation had a significant control on several businesses and opinions throughout the United States. And I think as time has gone on, you've seen different generations now occupy and own businesses and perspectives with the aging Gen X and even the millennial generation behind them. Video games is a very different thing.
I think with any medium that you have, it takes a while for people to truly accept it as an art form. When you look at photography, it was a novelty. When you look at film, it was at first, it was just like putting a random group of pictures together. And with video games, I think it's a similar phenomenon where initially it was looked at as just a bit of entertainment for kids. But as time has gone by, you know, I always find it funny that art is its own thing, its own category that's respected, and music is a category that's respected, and animation is a category that's respected. But games have all of those things, and that it's taken so long for people to truly accept it as art, when in every category, a game has a little bit of each of those things. So I think that it's about time, because they are art.
This is probably the most interactive form of art there is. If you're staring at a painting, you can stare at it all day and appreciate it. If you're engaging with a comic book, the most you can do is turn the pages. If you're watching a movie, the best you can do is sit there and interpret what the director's trying to tell you. With this form of art, you're actually literally involved. It's the most immersive kind of art there is.
The thing I've seen change over the last decade in retro gaming is really two things. It's many more people getting excited and jumping in and building up their own game collections. And then along with that is the prices of games have gone up because of that. It's basically just supply and demand.
So we have more and more people growing up with video games with a positive impact on their life. And so I definitely see people loving video games and what video games has brought to them. And I'm seeing the culture kind of open up and appreciate video games more and more because they've had more experience with it.
Any form of art throughout history, whether it was from the Greek era or Picasso, when people realize it's special, it is inevitable that it's going to end up in private collectors' homes, and it is inevitable it's going to be behind 3 inches of glass in a museum.
I have noticed, being in the collecting world for such a long time, that more people that I know have gotten into grading games and getting their video games graded. Definitely more than there was back 10 years ago or so. A lot of these collectors have kind of collected. They've got their complete collection. They've kind of hit a lot of milestones, done a lot of the goals they've had, let's say, in collecting. And from personal experiences, the people I talk to say, I kind of wanted to try something else. I kind of wanted to go for a new style, a new subset. And for a lot of these people, it was graded games.
I do think the graded games market has kind of had a negative residual effect on your average everyday casual gamer, because there are people out there that just like want a few cartridges, or they just want to like revisit their old games that they played growing up. And if one of them happens to be rare, they didn't even realize it, then they're like, oh, like now I have to pay hundreds of dollars for this game that I just owned growing up. And like, that's unfortunate, because those people just want to collect that thing for themselves and they have a passion for it. Yet these people who have nothing to do with video games, or coming from other markets like coins and collectibles and whatnot, they have artificially inflated the prices all around for their own greedy needs.
I think graded games have affected the market greatly. I think prices have gone up somewhat for the average gamer, but I don't think significantly. I think the only gamer that's significantly affected is the sealed gamer and the guys who want really good, clean copies of games. I think with regard to sealed game collecting, with the prices have gone up, the values have gone, and I think there's an established marketplace for people who want to preserve games like art. There's two major companies right now, which are VGA and WATA, who are kind of control the market, but I think WATA has a better control of the market because their relationship with heritage auctions. To an average gamer, this plastic, it's just plastic. It's irrelevant. It doesn't mean anything. But to a grader, it's paramount to everything. The values are all determined in plastic quality, which is insane. What are we talking about? Grading plastic or grading games? Sealed game variations. There's Nintendo has a very common sealed, which is the Y-fold, which is stripped right in the middle. There's variations of packaging. Not everyone did the same uniform packaging in video games. Throughout the years, things changed and different production facilities existed. Something like this, which is not an original seal. If you can tell, it's for something like this, the value is not there because it's not an original seal. Determining different packaging and variations of if it's a real seal versus an authentic seal, or a repack, or whatever the terminology people like to use, it varies. it's a lot of times it's based on touch to verify if it's original seal or not. Visually, it's hard to tell always, but some giveaways are basically like different white spots on opening creases. That kind of gives it away. There's stuff like this where we have it's original seal. It's not the typical original Y-fold, but there are variations.
I'm glad there are people who are grading sealed games because they're doing history a favor. I mean, I'm not one of them, but they are preserving something that posterity will be able to see. And I don't think really, if you ask gamers really, is that something that we want to lose?
I mean, the whole point of being a preservationist is so that these things, last longer than you do. We're trying to preserve these so that when we're gone, these things are still here.
My name is Dennis Kahn. I conceived and founded Wada Games, and I'm a video game collector. Wada is, in name, a certification and grading company, but we aim to be a lot more and provide a lot more to the video game collecting community and collectibles as a whole. Graded video games, certified video games are a way to eliminate a lot of the risk for people that are dealing with video game collecting and buying and selling. It's an authentication process. It provides confidence to buyers so they know exactly what they're getting, and the consistency of a grade, which can actually impact the value tremendously. Something that gets a 9.0 versus a 2.0 versus a 9.8 can have significantly different values in the market. Further with counterfeit, specifically in video games, it's a way to protect people against spending money on something that's fake, essentially. The vision behind WADA was really to elevate video game collecting as a whole, to legitimize it and bring credibility and confidence that just didn't exist previously. So through our product, through the technology, everything that's instilled there, our CEO Ryan Sabga, who provided that, really also helped create a product that not just elevated video game collecting, but really pushed the boundaries of how you can instill confidence in certification across collectibles in all fields. I think with the rise of graded games and what WADA has sort of how it's transformed the market, we've seen a lot of different effects. I think as a whole, because with the market just elevating so much and growing and knocking down those barriers to allow more people to come in, we've just seen so many different types of collectors coming into this. So previously where you had this really small community of video game collectors, it's 10 times as big now, right? So I think a lot of people feel like their kind of community is gone. But I look at it a little bit differently, where it's more like, this small thing that I understood, and that a lot of us, we were kind of weird, these video game collectors, like we were a small community. Well, now we get to share what we love with that many more people. I think it's awesome. Yes, I don't collect the same way as a lot of people who are coming in and collecting, but who am I to tell someone how they're supposed to collect? Collecting is a very personal thing, right? So if someone wants to spend $50,000 on a game, that's their prerogative. If someone wants to collect only cartridges, that's totally cool.
My name is Eric Nierman, and I'm an avid video game collector, and this is the VVG Club Collection. I estimate that this collection is worth somewhere around $5 to $6 million today. I'm an aesthetic general dentist in Hollywood, Florida. I've always been a collector my entire life. I'm known in the hobby as the dentist of video games because I spent $1 million on a group of very rare first print video games last September. They have that real organic rarity, especially the sealed ones. When you collected sports cards back in the day, you had organic rarity, whereas no one knew to save a Mickey Mantle card, no one knew to save a Babe Ruth card. And the people that did had something that was truly special and almost became like an art piece. What I love about sealed video games is that the seal, the original factory seal, gives it that organic rarity, that you know that most of these games that were distributed were open and you only have a select few that stayed closed. So that becomes a special art piece right there and something truly special to collect. What I love about WADA as well is that their displayability on their cases really turns that historic collectible into an art piece. So these are the two gems of my collection. and the games that I spent the most money on. This one is a first print Mario Brothers with a sticker seal, which means it's from the test market run of Nintendo in 1986. And there's only one of these in the world, and this is it. And I spent $95,000 on this. This one is a first print Castlevania, the first time Castlevania was released to the public, because it has the hang tab, which signifies the first print. And it's in amazing condition with almost a perfect seal. This one I spent $85,000 on. Both of these were steals. Since I bought these games, I've gotten a few unofficial offers of over $200,000 for each of them. But I'll tell you right now, if someone offered me $500,000 for each, I would not sell. The reason I prefer WADA grading over VGA grading for my games is that I love that they split up the box and the seal grade. That's very important to me because you know exactly what you're getting. So as a collector, you could say, okay, seal grade is really important to me, so I want games that have a perfect seal, which is an A++. Or some people really love the box grade, so they want a 9.6 or a 9.8. While VGA really groups them together as an average, and to me that's very vague, and you could have a lot of games with the same grade by VGA, and they could be totally different quality and look, and to me that was just a vague scale of grading, and WADA just speaks to me as a collector, and it's just so much more clear to me. So these are two of the most special games in my collection. They're both the same game. One's a first print matte seal, and one's a second print gloss seal. This represents the first print and second print of this game in 1985, and there's only one in the matte print and there's only one in the gloss print that have remained sealed, and these are both of them right here. So this is the only sticker sealed golf copies in the entire world, and I have both of them, and it's amazing to have them together in one collection. So the insider collectors will know about the recent mold pedigree that we call, where someone on eBay had found some really nice first print games, but they were left outside and became a little bit molded. So you see here that there's some remnants of the mold on top of his face over here, and there's a little bit in the back. My theory about it is a lot of people didn't want to buy it because obviously it's not in great condition. But my theory is that some of the games were just so rare that it was just too hard to let go, and I didn't care what condition it was in. I was going to buy them anyway, just based on the rarity. This was the first Super Mario Brothers that I ever saw, and someone told me that just to have the circle seal is super rare, so I was interested in it right away. And I had already seen some oval seals sell for around $3,000 to $4,000 at the time, and this was not only a circle seal, but it was called a no rev, where it doesn't have a Rev A marking, and this is even more rare than most prints that you get of this game, and this is the most iconic game. So at the time, I got presented to buy this for $13,000, and it was hard to do at the time, but I was confident that it would go up in price, and I did buy it for $13,000, and many of these circle seal games are now selling for $100,000 to $200,000 at the time. I hear a lot that people tell me that games are meant to be played and not to be encased, but to me that's just ridiculous, and it's a mantra of jealousy. The reason I feel this way is because you could play any game you want now digitally. By me collecting sealed games, it has no hindrance on anyone playing any game. When I think about it, I think about, someone who really likes Diet Coke, for example. We all know you could get Diet Coke at any store if you enjoy it. And let's say someone collects the first sealed Diet Coke that was ever released by Coca-Cola as a collectible. How does that affect your ability to get Diet Coke? And to me, that's just a mantra of jealousy, where why would anyone care if I'm boxing up a piece of history to enjoy and appreciate the nostalgia that it brought me, when they could easily play the game at any time that they want.
I do know there is a world out there of people who love graded games and love having a status or a price number or a rating on their video game. And that's cool, and I like that. And I tell people because I know there are some people who talk down on that and they go, hey, that's stupid. For those of you who think it's dumb and don't want to do it that way, then don't do it that way. Regardless, I think that gaming is such a cool community, especially retro gaming. It's such a different world, it's such a niche world, and I think that we can all learn something from each other looking at different ways that people collect.
The hard truth is, whether it comes to the most expensive rare games or graded games that are in pristine condition, the truth is, every gamer wants them. Every gamer wishes they could get those. People that are serious collectors really do wish they could get them. But there is no way that the average person is going to be getting those games. And so I think that there is some jealousy. I know I have it. When I see some of those things, I wish I could get those. I wish I could fork over $600,000 for a pristine Super Mario Brothers, but I can't. So I think, I have to cope with my own jealousy and pull it back and just realize that that's not going to be in the cards for me, probably.
I honestly don't have any idea if it's gonna stick, like the Great Games thing, or if it's just gonna like fizzle out as like a really expensive fad for the time being. I think it's gonna be an expensive fad. I really don't think that stuff's gonna stick in the long run. I might be entirely wrong, and that's fine, but I'm sure there will always be like a divide, and there'll be two communities now as a result.
I do understand that Wanda Games has been getting a lot of negative press from some people in the community. And I do know that one of the founders of Wanda Games, Dennis Kahn in particular, has literally been getting death threats. I don't understand. As far as my relationship with Dennis, I would like to reiterate, I hold no stock in what Dennis is doing. I don't own a single graded game. But I do know Dennis as the collector. That's how I met him. I met him about 5-6 years ago. And quite frankly, that man is passionate about this hobby. I don't think you can lay the market all on his shoulders, because quite frankly, if Dennis didn't start Wanda Games and the other 3 companies that were grading games didn't continue what they were doing, the market would have demand for it anyway. It's just inevitable. I believe there's this misconception going around that Dennis is just sitting back collecting money from Wanda, and he was never a real collector. I beg to differ, my friend. He really has one of the greatest collections I've ever seen, and that was in place well before Wanda was even conceptualized.
This is original art for a game that I actually had and that meant a lot to me as a kid, which is Mickey Mania, which I've got over here, the box, so you can see. So this is not a print. This is not reproduction or anything. This is the piece of art done by Greg Ray that they used for the cover. So as I said earlier, I think original art is just the best it gets with collecting, and I've never spent more on anything in my collection than I did for this piece, and I don't know if I'll ever own another piece of art for a game that I had as a kid, so it's incredibly important to me. These are some of my favorite standees right here. They're really hard to come by. You got the Blankas for the Street Fighters. You could actually swap these parts out, and then the Goros from Mortal Kombat. Personally, I'm a Mortal Kombat guy. That's the game I grew up with, but this one in particular, I got this one early into my collecting display. Like, it was one of my first significant displays I bought. And the reason this one is special is because of this note right here. And I'm gonna read it. It's got a signature on it. And it says, it was sold to someone named Richard, who someone bought it from, and then I bought it from that person. Hey Richard, thanks for being a fan and for supporting Mortal Kombat over the years. Like I said in my listing, this Goro standee was given to me by none other than the game creator, John Tobias, back in the day when we did the games. You have something very rare in your possession now. Fight to keep it yours forever. He didn't do a real good job of that. No one else on this planet has what you have now. That came from an original Mortal Kombat actor and was once in the office of the MK creator. Thanks again, and then it's the guy, I forget his name, who played Kano, Baraka, Cabal, and Quan Chi in both. He did the character stuff and then in the movies. So knowing that this was in John Tobias's office is like, that's so special to me. I could never get rid of something like that, and I'm in love with it. This is my Game Boy collection, CIB Game Boy collection. I still have one game left, and I started collecting started doing Game Boy in 2009. So like over a decade it's taken me to get this far. Game Boy is, and this is with variants. So if you see duplicates, they're all variants. There's a ton of really cool variants on Game Boy. Like you'll see Bonk's Adventure was published by Hudson Soft. but then there's also an Electro Brain re-release. And you know, where is it, like Alleyway or Baseball there's 4 different prints. There's actually more than that. So it was so fun to actually track them down and figure out what variants exist and checking them off one by one. And Game Boy, no one had a reason to keep the boxes. So it's so hard to find them in the box. That's why it took so long. Some of these titles, they don't even sell for that much, but they show up on eBay once a year, if even. So it was really, really fun to do that, and it was easily my favorite system to collect for, and I almost don't want to get that last game because if I do, it's over. Yeah, I mean, the games are meant to be played. It's the age-old argument. Comics are meant to be read. You know, how far back can we go? Again, I'm not one to tell someone how to collect, but thank God for technology. You see how many games I have. I haven't put any of these games in a system because I have an EverDrive. I have, like, technology has enabled us to have the exact same experience. Like with a comic, it's actually it's different. You reading a reprint or reading a digital comic is not the same experience as holding the comic in your hand from like a, you know, if you have like an Amazing Fantasy 15, right, the first appearance of Spider-Man. It's a different experience. It smells different. With a video game, the EverDrives work on original hardware, right? Or it's not even emulation. So your experience is more related to the TV that you're using than the actual game itself. So I think that because of technology, because of the resources we have, that argument becomes totally moot. And what it does actually is it enables us to look at the actual physical games in a different light. It enables us to appreciate it for more than just the gameplay. It enables us to look at it and say, this has beautiful artwork. Who was the artist who did this, right? Packaging. I mean, I collect displays. That's all about, these were just marketable materials that got thrown out. And the last thing I have to say is, if games were meant to be played, then they wouldn't be collected. Because if they were meant to be collected, they wouldn't be a collectible. Beanie Babies were meant to be collected. That's why they're not. That's why they crashed. It's the stuff that you were meant to use, to toss out, the boxes, the original packaging, that becomes collectible over time. And thank God we did that, because now there's a whole market around it, and there's all this excitement and a community built around preserving these old pieces of history. It's culture. It's pop culture, and it's important to all of our lives.
My name is Danny Villerop. I'm a collector from the Netherlands, and I'm the owner of concertvariations.com. Concert Variations is a hyper database with all the hardware you can think of, all the controllers, all the consoles, all the accessories, and even prototype. So this is my Nintendo GameCube collection. It's a 100% complete collection, including the controllers and accessories. We start from the left top, which are the Super Smash Bros. Controllers. Followed up by the Emerald Green and the Wavebirds. The Wavebirds are wireless controllers. The most rare one is the Condom one. There are only 2,000 made. It's also the most expensive one. This is from Club Nintendo, and then we have the wired versions of Club Nintendo. The Mario version was also released in Europe, but the rest are all Japanese exclusive. Here we have dev kits and prototypes. These are two prototype controllers. This is the first version, and this is the second version. This is an orange GameCube that was only released in Japan. We have the Starlight GameCube, which is gold. It was only available in Toys R Us. Then we have the Resident Evil 4. We have a very rare Heineken GameCube. There was a contest in the Vibe magazine. Only 50 are made. And then we have the Panasonic Q, which was basically the rival of PS2 because it supported DVD. It also had a brand new Game Boy player. Below there's a Hunching Tigers. Back in 2003, Nintendo sponsored Hunching Tigers, so this was like a celebration console. This was Tales of Symphonia. It was an online game. This is the Gundam one. It came with a figure and a Game Boy player. This is a very rare Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles version. There are only 150 made, and it was a giveaway in a magazine. And this is the ATI console. It was only given away to GPU employees. And here are all the accessories. I have them all, including the very rare SD card reader that was only meant for Animal Crossing. Endzone Magazine is a magazine company that was licensed by Nintendo, hosted in Germany. Endzone Magazine is basically the Nintendo Power of Europe. When their 200th magazine was released, they had a few contests. So this is the contest page. You have to fill in a form, send it to Endzone, and you had a chance to win one of these prizes. One of them is a Nintendo DS with Mario 64 on it. The Nintendo DS was cancelled because there were just 2 less entries. Apparently one of the insiders who worked there just took it with him. He stole it. And he sold it to me a few years later. This is only one made. It was bundled with Super Mario 64. And it was issue 200th issue of the Endzone magazine. In 2009, THQ figured out that the Queen of England loved to play Wii bowling for the Nintendo Wii. THQ was also developing a video game called Big Family Games. And to promote that system, they made a 24-karat golden Wii to give it to the Queen of England and her family to play on. So this was disposed to all the press, and there were stories and everything that they still have it. But the truth is they never received it. They cancelled it without the press knowing. When THQ got bankrupt, there was a high-level collector who purchased every development console and prototypes in the entire office basically. And that system was included. So on a forum called Assembler Games, I met him, we talked, we discussed, and eventually we came to a deal where I purchased that console from him. So this is my holy grail cabinet. All my rarest items are in here. So we start with the golden Wii. This Nintendo Wii is actually exactly the same as every other Wii, only it's 24 karat gold. It's the first version, which still has the GameCube port. I'm wearing gloves because it's too expensive to hold with my bare hands. The Wii was actually displayed vertically on a pillow when it was presented to the press. Funny enough, it was actually glued on because there's still some residue on the back. So you can still see some red stuff on it from the pillow. This is an unreleased color of the Nintendo 64. It was actually set up on auction in 2011. It was sold for $1,200 and never to be seen again. Apparently, this buyer never paid and the seller still had it. I contacted the seller 9 years later, and this is the system. This is an Xbox One of rare replay. There are only 5 made in the world. You can win one via Comic-Con, there was one given away via Twitter, and one via Facebook, and there was also one able to win at Gamescom. At Gamescom you have to participate in a special tournament when they made a custom level of Battletoads, and the highest score was able to win this console. This one came from Facebook. When I let Rare know that I owned this console, they invited me over. And then when I did, everyone went down and signed this console. The reason why I collect consoles is that they are challenging to collect than games, in my opinion, and everything has a story behind them. Every limited edition, every giveaway, there's always a story behind it that makes it special, and that's the reason why I collect consoles. And when you have a complete collection, you have an entire, story to tell others about the whole history about that system.
So I remember growing up in a rural area in Northern California, and going to a rental store to get a video game was typically a weekly or every other week experience. We would get take and bake pizza, we would get a movie in, and if we were good, we would get a video game to rent for our Nintendo Entertainment System, typically back in the day. And so I remember going into one of 2 main video rental stores in my hometown at the time, and looking at the box art. And at the time I wasn't looking at video game magazines, there wasn't the internet, and so you had to go either by word of mouth of other kids you went to school with, or you would look at that box art, you'd turn it on the backside, and you'd make a judgment call. Sometimes I would make that decision with my brother. Sometimes we'd flip a coin. Sometimes, we'd just take a gamble. Most of the time, we were pretty good at picking good games, and you definitely found out pretty fast. If a game was terrible, you would tell people about it. You'd find out what are the good games, what are the bad games from kids at school.
I remember going to the video store broke just to see what game, just to see the selection, just to see what they had. It's like, oh, I saw that in Nintendo Power. There's a Nintendo game that just came out. I've never even heard of that one. And you just had to, grab the game and look at the back of the box and look at the pictures. That's all you had. You didn't have the internet. You couldn't look up gameplay footage. You couldn't look up somebody streaming it on Twitch. You certainly couldn't look up any reviews or anything like that. You actually either had to see it in a magazine or literally just take, here's what the cover art looks like. Cool. Flip it around. You see 2 or 3 screenshots, a little synopsis about the game. That's all you had to judge on.
There was a time not too long ago where if I saw a game that I wanted, but it had like an old rental sticker on it, I'd be like, I'm not going to get that one. But now, like the whole concept of going out and renting something is so antiquated that just adds to it. So it's, especially if it is a place that we grew up going to.
I love finding games with rental stickers on them because that's a piece of history. That's a part of its journey or where it came from. Sometimes I'll find games here in the Northwest that have rental sticker stores in Virginia or something like that. And I love it when people write on their cartridges. I know a lot of people don't, but I love it, turning on the back of the card, it's like, Thompson, and it has like their phone number or something. I'm half tempted to call the phone number, see if the family still lives there, saying, hey, I found your copy of Silent Scope. Where can I send it back to you,
For me, that personally adds to the likability of the product. If I find somebody's high score written in the back of an instruction booklet, I can be like, oh my gosh, this kid, this guy, he played this game when he was a little kid and he got this high score, and I bet he loved this game. I bet he cherished it.
The sticker makes it sicker.
I absolutely love it when I find stickers that are retro. The original stickers, it makes it so much cooler in my opinion. It's just like a staple part of physical media that isn't as like popularized or polarized as I think it should be.
Video stores actually led to a lot of innovation. Way back in 1994, Blockbuster actually teamed with New Leaf, a company that basically wanted to make it easier to get the games and get the movies and get the music that you wanted on demand. Blockbuster Game Factory Green and Blockbuster Game Factory Blue. And basically what these were flash carts that were at kiosks in 10 Columbia, South Carolina stores where you could go in, you could type what game you wanted, and it would write the game to the cart. You'd take it home, you'd play it, you'd bring it back, it would erase it and be ready for the next person.
We have any video game you like.
What if I don't know what I want?
You can preview them all right here.
Then what do I do?
Pick one, and we'll produce it on the spot.
And eventually they wanted to bring that into movies and music as well.
Hi, excuse me, do you have the new album by
We
Janet?
sure do. CD or cassette.
How do you know you have it? I haven't even told you the title yet.
We have everything.
You might be sold out.
We're never sold out.
Unfortunately, they did a test on this in Columbia, South Carolina from August 10th through August 15th of 1994, and some things they did not anticipate. A lot of companies just wanted nothing to do with it because it was such a new technology. They thought that they were going to be losing money because they couldn't actually keep track of what was being rented. Sega Genesis said yes, but then individual companies, most of them said no. So there were only a few games available. The other thing that was the problem was a bunch of the games took way too long to write. So you had to wait in real time as these games were written to these cartridges. So New Leaf and Sega Genesis spent so much money in advertising, trying to get as many companies as they could. They even hired Dennis Miller as a spokesperson, and they were only able to put these in stores for 5 measly days. However, it made this one, the green, and this one, the blue, very, very rare, and it's actually one of the most rare things in the Genesis set. The green will run you between like $250 to $450 while we're filming this documentary. The blue you almost never see available and can go upwards of $1,000.
This is actually not that rare. This is a copy of Baby Boomer on the NES. It's an unlicensed Color Dreams game. And it's like got a printed black and white manual because it came from a rental store. I actually got this from my own childhood rental store that I used to rent games from growing up, in addition to a few other Nintendo games. The name of the store was actually a really weird name. It was called Take Home Our Movies. It was like awkward, and like that was the name of the store. It was in a strip mall. It just said, Take Home Our Movies. And that was it. I was like, okay, makes sense to me. I was driving through my hometown with my girlfriend, and we were driving past that strip mall, and I was like nostalgically being like, man, there was my video store I used to go to, because I do that every time when we drive by it, because I'm just like a sentimental bastard. And then I had this idea. I was like, well, what if I pull into the parking lot and go into the liquor store that was like a few storefronts over, and that's been there since the 80s and like still is there today. And why don't I just talk to whoever's in there and see if they remember the video store and who ran it. So I went in there and I like bought a drink, and I just struck up a conversation with the owner of the liquor store who happened to be there that day. And I just casually was like, hey, remember that video store over there? And he was just like, oh yeah, so-and-so and so-and-so, and yeah, I know the family and this and that. He knew all their names. And he I said that I wanted to reach out to him to try to acquire some old games. And he, you know, he was like into the idea. He thought it was cool that I remembered it, because no one ever talked about that place anymore, because it just kind of disappeared in time. And so I took that information and I went home and did some internet sleuthing, and I like tracked down like the son of the owners of the video store, and it was like, hey man, this sounds really weird, and like, sorry if it's like off-putting, but like, do you have any of the old video games or whatever that your mom and dad's store used to carry? Like I have a lot of nostalgia for renting games from their store, and I'm a big video game collector, and I'm just wondering if there's anything left over. And he was like, actually, there is a bunch left over at my mom and dad's house up in Wisconsin, and you know, I'll mediate it for you. I'll go check on it, and I'll get them all out for you, and then we can meet up at some point and you can buy them. And I was like, no way. Like I was like so thrilled that I could finally have like a piece of that actual era. A few weeks went by, I was like, we were messaging back and forth at a glacial pace. I gave him my address. He like put 2 and 2 together, and he's like, oh, I'll be like a block away from you like on Thursday. We'll just meet. So like some weird twist of fate, those games magically traveled down to Chicago, and I just like walked out of my apartment door, and he was like, here you go, man. It was like $5 each. And I was like, cool. And then he also had some posters and like random VHS tapes and stuff that I also bought, just because I was like, hey, give me everything you got.
When collecting now, there's a lot of games that are unlicensed, and there's a reason for that. I mean, Nintendo had very strict standards on what they wanted and what they would accept, but there were a lot of people who saw this as a cash cow. They wanted to get some money, and so how could they do that? So they figured out ways to circumvent Nintendo's chip and everything, and they also wanted to try to reach markets that Nintendo wasn't really reaching. They wanted to reach the adult market. They wanted to reach the Christian market. Those games they weren't printed in the same kind of quantities. It was so niche, they weren't going to be found at Toys R Us. They weren't going to be found, you know, in regular stores. So they were so niche that now there just aren't that many of them.
This is the most common example of a wisdom tree game. This is the Bible Adventures. These are, as you could tell, this is almost self-explanatory. These are Christian-based video games.
I distinctly remember when I was a kid, we would go into this one Bible bookstore, a Christian store, and they had this one little counter under the glass with Nintendo games, but they were all Bible Nintendo games. I remember seeing Bible Adventures there for sure. And I remember just, you know, because it was Nintendo, I wanted to get it, but my parents always said no. So seeing a game like Bible Adventures under that glass at a Christian bookstore, there weren't many ways you could get that game. I mean, you could get it at that store, or you could maybe mail off from a Christian catalog or something.
From what I understand, I never saw them. There were commercials, supposedly, with, you know, where you can call and order these direct.
So you guys getting hungry?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Do you ever worry that they're playing too much Nintendo?
Oh, not anymore. See, Matt has Bible Adventures. They're actually learning Bible stories while they're playing Nintendo.
Quick, get that Bible quote before you run out of power.
Bible Adventures features 3 games in 1 cartridge: Noah's Ark, Save Baby Moses, and David and Goliath. A must for every family with Nintendo. Call 1-800-77-BIBLE. That's 1-800-77-BIBLE.
There really weren't many ways to get it, so how is the average kid gonna find it? And that's why it's rare to this day.
Later in the life of these games, as a good friend of mine pointed out, a lot of these ended up in a lot of used video game stores, you know, because this would be the first thing that a kid would trade in once they realized there were a lot better stuff out there. The Nintendo versions of these games, the NES version of these games, are uncommon, but they're not extremely rare. The ones that really got to be rare are, you know, from the Super Nintendo era. Those games seem to be the more valuable ones.
This is a cool little set. It's very esoteric, and I love oddball stuff like this. This is the full, and some behind there, the full HES set, which was Home Entertainment Suppliers. They were basically the distributor for unlicensed NES games in Australia. They actually have, I pulled one aside here, because they either had these funky shaped cartridges, or they came with something called a dongle to basically bypass the lockout chip on the NES. So they come in these really funky VHS style clamshells. So another interesting one is Chiller, which is also an unlicensed game for the NES.
Sometimes you'd be at the video store, you'd see this weird game that looked a little different color, different shape. You'd bring it home and you'd play it, and you would, what the heck is this? This is not Mario Brothers. What is going on? And then you start wondering, like, maybe you don't want your mom to come in and see what you're actually playing.
I know with my friends growing up and going to rent movies, kind of the big thing to do would be to go rent Faces of Death and then tell your friends about it. And I'm talking about when I was like 12 years old. And the video game equivalent of Faces of Death has to be Chiller.
Chiller was actually an arcade machine. It was very controversial when it was released. It's a point and click game, and you have to just click a bunch of times and it rips a girl's arm off and stuff. Really messed up. The arcade machine got banned because it was so gruesome. They dumbed down, like they made it, like the NES version is a little bit more appropriate, even though it's still really messed up.
So Chiller was, to me, like the anti-Nintendo game because it was so violent. It definitely was going for that shock value. That was kind of a theme with several video games. Even going back to the Atari 2600, you had the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Texas Chainsaw Massacre was not allowed to be sold in several stores. There's only a few places that offered it. And the same thing with unlicensed games. Nintendo just pretty much put the kibosh on that and just said, if you carry these games in your store, then you cannot carry licensed games. And so that really limited the places where certain unlicensed games were sold.
With their marketing, they tried to make this game, which was all about torture, seemed like it was the worst damn thing. It was almost as if Satan made it himself. So there was a real cult following trying to find this game and play it. There was no internet back then. So, if you wanted to find something, you really had to go out there and look for it. And I think Chiller is a good example of that.
So actually, by chance, I have the AGCI, which is the unlicensed version on the NES that you usually see. That's a pretty little fun game there.
Typically, and this is where I found my copy of Chiller, was actually a rental store. And a rental store had a copy, and when they went out of business, they sold it, and that's how I got my copy. So rental stores became kind of a place, especially mom and pa rental stores, for these unlicensed games back in the yesteryear. Because, big corporations aren't going to go hunt down an individual rental store in a small rural community. And so that typically was where you found some of these games.
So the moment everyone's been waiting for is my pornographic Panesian games. Like, I only have 2 of them. There are 3 of them in the set, and it kind of bothers me that I don't have the 3rd one, but I'm working on that. Maybe I'll someday get it. These 2 games, Peekaboo Poker and Hot Slots, but in my instance, I like to call mine Hot Lots because I have the label tear that tore out the S, so I got the rare variant right here. But these 2 games, they're pornographic Nintendo games. They were unlicensed. They weren't licensed by Nintendo officially. Some company made 3 pornographic Nintendo games and made them available to mom and pop video stores to rent out. And I think that's the only way you could actually experience them back in the day. So nowadays they're extremely rare. Like, the level of rarity is through the roof because you actually couldn't buy them in a store. So the only way they leaked out into the market is from like clearance bins of when video stores were shutting down or whatnot.
Sputnik's Movie Empire. Nintendo games for $2.50. We have Sega Genesis games for $2.50. We have some Super Nintendo games, $2.50. You can't find these at Walmart. Spudix Movie Empire.
These last couple of years, I've been buying a bunch of erotic games because I have basically everything else that's interesting for me. I found Bubble Bath Babes for the Famicom. I didn't know what it was until I got it, but just the cover alone made me want to get it. And from the back side, it looks like a puzzle game. And I love puzzle games. So I got it. And it's actually a really, really good puzzle game. I've never seen a puzzle game that has these mechanics exactly like this one. It's very enjoyable, especially in 2-player mode as well. So I've played it a lot with friends. Not because of the nudity, because it's actually a good game as well. So this is apparently a very rare game today. I bought it many years ago. And it's quite minty with everything intact. It's for the Famicom. And I gave $100 for it many years ago.
I don't actually know where they were actually where they were located in the video stores. Like, I think you had to ask about them. I think it's a lot of lore at this point. Like, no one really knows the actual story behind them. I think some of the old timers might know, but it's like a lot of those guys don't even really post on forums anymore or anything. So I think they just probably had them readily available, because I've definitely read online that some people remember seeing them at the video store, somewhere on the bottom shelf. I think in the video game section. So I don't think they had it in a porno section, or maybe it was up to the discretion of whoever ran the store. Maybe they wanted to put them in the porno section, or maybe they put them in the video game section. I don't know. No, I've never looked at these games with blacklight, and I'm afraid to. Probably these are in these box protectors, so in case anything new happens, they'll be protected.
Soft Porn Adventure by Online Systems. And this is the prequel to, or the game that is the whole Leisure Suit Larry series is based on, the first Leisure Suit Larry game. And the woman here, Roberta Williams, is the woman who wrote the whole game. And she's done Knight's Quest and a bunch of other games after that as well. And it's a brilliant game. It's so funny. It's not as... It's soft. It's soft porn. And it is a floppy disk. Like, a real floppy disk. And I've played this game with so many friends. And everybody has been laughing and having so much fun. And I bought it. And a few months later, a friend of mine who knows that I bought it told me that it was just sold a copy on eBay in not as good condition as mine and everything like that. And it was 15,000 kroners, which is approximately, I don't know, $2,000 or something.
You know, a lot of these unlicensed games were controversial. They had adult content. So you might find some of these unlicensed games in an adult section at a video rental store. You might find, them, behind the counter. Even some games were sold with a lock and key, going back to the Atari 2600 days. And so, because they were so recluse and the distribution of them was so limited, that as time went along, not many copies of these games survived. And so most of these copies of these games are now in collectors' hands. There's not many out in the wild. You can't go to many thrift stores and just find them. And so finding these controversial games now is rare, and will typically fetch quite a lot.
As much as game collecting is awesome, there's downfalls if you get too into it. Kind of really with anything in the world, too much of something can be a bad thing per se, not specifically speaking about game collecting. I know personally in my life before, there's been times where I've maybe spent a little more money than I would have liked to, or tried to keep up with other YouTubers, and that's something that I think also needs to be looked at. Is a lot of times pickup videos or collectors were kind of known by some people on the outside you guys are just trying to show off, you're just trying to one-up each other. And as much as I like to back myself away from that, I have to realize that there is some times where I have to step back and go, the only really reason that I picked that up is because I wanted to show people. I don't really have a connection to it. I don't really feel any nostalgia for it, and heck, I don't even really like the game. So personally for me, I feel like I've had to pull back the reins quite a few times. If I'm collecting for just some sort of status of saying I own this or I have this, For me, that's personally unhealthy. Also with my family as well, there's been multiple times where hey, I'm gonna go to the swap meet instead of go hang out with the family like I know I said I would. So I've stepped back from that, and I also tell other people now, I'm like, well, going forward, be careful how much you dive deep into this. Make sure you put the important things in your life a step above of your hobbies.
I get this question a lot. What is the difference between collecting and hoarding? Honestly, I don't know if there is. I want there to be. As a collector, I really do.
I think as long as you keep things organized and you can walk on the floor, it's not hoarding. It's collecting.
Yeah, I've been called a hoarder a lot. I don't think it's the same as real hoarding. I mean, it depends what it is. Whatever it is you're filling your house up. If it's something that makes you happy, I'm all for it. Yeah, I mean, that's all I say. Like, if it's something you like, if you want to have it, then, it's good.
The funny thing about collecting is I know people who have basically the Library of Congress when it comes to books in their living room, like next to their TV console and stuff like that. And people will go up to them and say, oh, that's a nice collection of books. But they see my pile of video games, it's like, oh, you're just a hoarder. It's like, where's the divide that says, like, my collection of video games isn't hoarding, but somebody who has a bunch of books, how is it any different?
I've seen collecting destroy people where it's gone too far. Some of the unhealthy choices that comes with video game collecting, debt. I've seen a lot of gamers out there collect too much, where it's impacted their relationships with their partners, where they've gone into debt where they couldn't pay their bills, space, where it takes up too much space, and then that becomes a problem. It impacts their day-to-day living, which then, impacts your mental health.
The most important aspect of being a person is the relationships we have with people, and unfortunately, collecting, there's a dark side where it can interrupt relationships, whether friendships. I've known of people who fought over games that they couldn't get, or sweeping in and taking something that someone else wanted, and then it causes a rift. Or I've known of marriages that have fallen apart because people are spending too much, or hiding the purchases, hiding how much they're spending from their husband or wife.
So I have family overseas that again, it's a very cultural thing. Like I said earlier, it's very American to collect stuff in the way that we collect it, and they just don't get it, right? It's very different, but again, it's because it's not part of their culture. So I totally understand where people are coming from, where they don't get it, but for us, it's just a representation of what we grew up with and capturing that.
Having a game collection, I don't want to say necessarily that it's like a taboo in Japan. It kind of goes along with that sort of like otaku culture, I guess, which is like obsessive fandom. So some people are really obsessed with manga, for example, so they'll have huge collections of manga or figures or something like that. It's not necessarily frowned upon, but I think most people do tend to kind of keep things like that personal, unless you're like sharing it with like a group of friends and you're all into like the same thing. It's not necessarily something that you're like, making this like big public thing about you. So I think, like, for example, like there are less Japanese gaming YouTubers that the focus of their channel is like their game collecting. Like if you go and watch a lot of Japanese YouTube gaming, it focuses a lot more on like gameplay, like showing expertise in gameplay and things like that, whereas it's way more commonplace for like North American channels. Collecting is a big part of that. So doing pickups videos and doing room tours and showing off your collection and things like that, that is far less common on Japanese gaming YouTube. Not so much that there's a stigma attached to it, but I think generally people are just like more personal about that kind of thing here.
Are there positive things about collecting? Absolutely. With my mental health background, collecting can give you an outlet. I've seen a lot of people use collecting as like a healthy outlet for stress. They might have a day job that's really stressful. I know in my previous journey with jobs, I've had stressful jobs before, and I use collecting as a healthy outlet to kind of relieve that stress. Playing games or collecting games, or even just having conversations about collecting with others has been really healthy. You definitely have to remember balance in your life. and knowing what's best for you, knowing what's best for your family, and ultimately, at the end of the day, are you having fun doing it? Are you still enjoying the hobby? Are you still finding that passion about collecting or talking about something? That's really a determining factor of continuing with it.
My husband and I actually met in 2014, right after I got my first N64. I bought an N64, and then about 2 weeks later I met him. And I noticed on his Instagram he had pictures of like game collection, and it was like half of this. I'm just gonna say that, okay? We've collected a lot since we've been married together, but we really, when I first saw that, I was like, okay, this guy like collects retro games too. This is really cool. He likes to play games. He's a video gamer. But then diving into it more, I really found out that he was a collector, and there was a whole world that I didn't even know about of retro gaming that I never knew would be a thing because of the fact that, you know, he was already involved in it and already in the retro community and already getting those games. So he really introduced me to the retro world. After we got married, you know, we walked down the aisle to a Legend of Zelda song. In our like whole entire reception and everything, we had video game music. Like, we just love it. It's been a huge part of our relationship. We had an N64 at our wedding. So it's always been a really cool thing for us to kind of do and play. These are my husband's underwear from when he was a child. They're not from right now. They are Super Mario, I think Super Mario 3 little undies, and I love them. We found them when we were cleaning, the last time we were cleaning up the game room, and I was like, okay, we're putting these on the wall. So these hang on our wall. So we're really not too sure where these came from. They were his, but they just all of a sudden appeared like in a box. So we think that he just put them in his box of collectibles when he was 10 or 11 years old. Because these, you know, obviously would probably fit like a 7 to 10-year-old, I'm figuring. And so we figure that he just put them in the box of all his little collectibles, because he did have like a lot of collectible figurines and all of his video games. And so they've just lasted till then, and they're actually in really good shape. And everyone's always like, oh, that's gross. But you know, you wash underwear and you wear it all the time, so why not? And obviously they're starting to wear out a little bit, but other than that, they're pretty cute, and something that's really rare in a collection that a lot of people don't have. They don't have underwear on their wall for video game collecting. If my husband one day walked away from the retro video game world, I would be so excited, because I would get all these video games. I'd be like, listen, I don't know how we're gonna do this anymore. It would depend on how much he walked away from. But you know, if he walked away from it and said, I don't want to see a retro video game for the rest of my life, we would probably have a bigger issue than, you know, just our collection, because there's no way I think I could be with somebody who could not be into video games or support somebody who likes something. You know, it's a big thing to be supportive of each other and have those connections with something, whether it's just one thing or 10 things. And that is one of the things that we have as retro gaming, and we love it together, and that in itself makes us stronger.
My wife had cancer, and so it was this crossroads of really needing something to distract myself from that part of my life and wanting to get into something new. So I basically started liquidating my toys and comics and started funneling it en masse into a video game collection. My wife passed away of stage 4 breast cancer, and I was her primary caretaker for that entire journey, and that was about 4 years. But when she was diagnosed terminal, which means like no chance of ultimate survival, she wouldn't be able to be cured at that point, then her life insurance policy unexpectedly paid out. So we did lots of responsible adult things with most of that money. But then afterwards, she had some left over, and she came to me and she said, hey, you know, you stuck through me with this, and you take care of me, and I love you. You know, I'd love to do something for you. What do you want? This was the copy of Stadium Events that my wife bought me when we discovered that she was sick. It's one of my favorite pieces, and not because of the monetary value necessarily, as much as the intrinsic sentimental value. It means a lot to me. So I started collecting about 5 or 6 years ago, and it did transform over time. And I think any hobby does that, and I do think it's very important to set goals, especially when you're starting out, because you don't get a collection like this immediately, right? So you start with very achievable goals, and then you kind of get bigger and bigger and bigger. And so I started out collecting games, and I just had decided that When I started, I had maybe a shoebox collection of 10 or 15 Super Nintendo games, and I had decided that, okay, well, I want to get every Super Nintendo game ever made, or every North American, or every English Super Nintendo game ever made. So I ended up getting the whole Super Nintendo set in 2.5 months, which is bonkers. And then I was just kind of go set to set, and I've done 11 or 12 sets now, full sets. Part of collecting that I really love is the chase, not just the, oh yeah, I have this artifact from my childhood or whatever. Some of these things, definitely not from my childhood. But the chase is really important to me. And so I had gotten to the point where I started to get bored with games, right? Because retail games are expensive, but not difficult. Really, your only gate is monetary, right? Like with the advent of eBay and different Facebook groups and all that kind of stuff, like you can essentially buy as fast as you can afford to for most things. I really started to feel a need to try to hunt things that were more and more difficult. So one of the things that I collect is internal Nintendo awards, so awards that were given to employees for various reasons. This one is absolutely my favorite. This is a 20-year Nintendo Service Award, so an employee would have to be with Nintendo for 20 years before receiving them. Now they don't even give them these, they give them these block, like crystal block numbers. So even if you were there for 20 years now, you don't get one of these statues. This guy is solid bronze and marble. And so he is very, very heavy, and he's actually made by the same company that makes the Oscars. So he's very, very high quality and extremely challenging to find, because generally if someone is with Nintendo for 20 years, they have very fond memories of that. So finding someone who's willing to even part with one or even willing to talk to you about it is very challenging. So I'm super happy to have this, but yeah, he's my favorite. I like to say that if something is for sale, I'm not interested. Like, that's the level of rarity that I generally look for at this point. So the things that I'm hunting for, a lot of times I don't know that I'm even looking for them, because I am doing things where I am discovering that things exist as I'm finding them. That happens a lot especially with the original art pieces. Like, people ask me what my holy grail is, and I just say it's the next thing, it's the next piece, and I don't even know what that is yet. This jacket actually started my obsession with Nintendo gameplay counselors.
You're going to come across this big sea serpent. You'll get to a place where there's this big skull head guy. It looks kind of like something from Star Wars.
If you look at the very first page of the first issue of Nintendo Power, there is an ad for the Nintendo Power line, the tip line that you would call to talk to a gameplay counselor. And there were 3 actors, I'm assuming, wearing these gray jackets. And so I was curious as to whether or not those jackets actually existed, and I was eventually able to find them. It turns out that these gray Samus jackets were only given to the first 40 or so Nintendo gameplay counselors. And then afterwards, they were, subsequent hires were then able to sort of pick their own jacket, pick their own design. So this whole case is full of original clay maquettes from Nintendo Power magazine. In the early run of Nintendo Power, like say the first 12 issues or so, a lot of them weren't drawn covers, they were sculpted covers. So they would have someone sculpt these maquettes and then photograph them for the covers. So you can see in here they all sort of correspond, they have the corresponding cover paired with them. So there's the shoes from the Track and Field 2 cover. Here's the Mario Paint Mario, the Mario 3 Mario, Wily and Mega Man from the Mega Man 2 cover, and the kind of mechanical robot from Super C. And these are all partially polymer clay, but then also kit bashes. If you look at the underside of Wily, you'll see a lot of like Gundam parts and stuff like that they just sort of cobbled together. The shoes for Track and Field 2 are just a pair of Converse that they glued things to. And one thing that I love about these is that they were modeled very intentionally. They were sculpted with just the angle that the photographer was going to shoot them at in mind. So if you turn around this Mario Paint Mario, he is this like horror show Cthulhu-esque monstrosity made of popsicle sticks. And I just think it's funny to me that they were so cognizant of like just what the photographer was going to shoot, that they saved time and money by not sculpting the front of him. So this is definitely one of my favorite and also one of my rarest signs in the collection. This is a fiber optic Nintendo Power Glove sign. This is from CES 1990, we think. It was made for a single trade show. They've made 2 of them in this size. We did also find a 3rd one in like a smaller desktop size, but if you want these big 3x3 signs, there's only 2 of them. And these were found in a storage locker in Arizona, and they were actually on Craigslist forever, and no one knew what they were, and nobody thought that they were legitimate. They thought someone had made them, like a custom thing. It wasn't until someone actually drove out there and picked them up and then did some research to find out that they were from the Mattel booth at CES in 1990. So as far as we know, from photos and accounts from actually the people who made these signs, there are 2 of them. This is one example. And the other one actually is owned by Dennis Kahn.
The guy who actually had these, I think he worked at Mattel. He had both, and he was only selling one. And he said, I got to him and I said, well, whatever it'll take, I'll figure it out. And we were trying to work it out. But then he said, I'm only interested in trading for other fiber signs. And I said, well, I don't have any fiber signs to trade. So Stefan did, and so he got the one. And I was so pissed off, and I said, I harassed the guy. I said, if you ever sell the other one, let me know. Well, he let Stefan know, and Stefan got the other one, and he was gracious enough to let me know when that happened. So now we both have the 2 that are out there, which is pretty special. It's a really neat sign, and it's a cool piece of history promoting something that was just so bad.
So I've talked a little bit about how difficult it is to find any art from Nintendo Power at all, but there are sort of sub-levels of difficulty there as well. One of the most notoriously difficult things to find is reader-submitted art, and generally they would do that by sending in art on the front of envelopes. And because they were children and Nintendo wants to protect privacy and all that, generally these were either destroyed or kept at Nintendo essentially forever. I was fortunate enough to not only find envelope art, but an entire set of envelope art. So this is every piece of envelope art that was published in this issue of Nintendo Power. And I mean, just the likelihood of finding a piece of envelope art is crazy, and then finding a whole set of it was just otherworldly. Rarity is, first of all, it's a really subjective thing to talk about, but especially when you're talking about value of things, because at the very rare end, where you're talking about one of a kind or just a couple of something in existence, it's very difficult to talk about value, because sometimes when you're asking me about an item, well, the first time that it was ever sold was when I bought it. So I can't really put a price tag on something. Or sometimes I won't exactly know how to evaluate something until someone comes to me and asks to buy it. So I have standing offers on a few things that previously I wouldn't have known how to evaluate them because I was the first one to buy them. But like something like my Super Metroid strategy guide cover, I have the original painting for that. I have a standing offer for $75,000 on that piece. Very much things are only worth what someone will pay for it. So oftentimes, again, especially when you're talking about things that sell so infrequently, that I can't evaluate them. That's the only way that I would ever know how much something is worth, is when someone asks to buy it from me. Which almost is always, the answer is almost always no.
The infamous Cardi B game that never existed, probably for good reason. I was going to hack this as dance aerobics, and I was going to put her in dance aerobics, which is a power pad game, just for fun, just to be silly. But I was like, I gave up about halfway through, or partway through anyway. It's a long process to hack these video games. I figured if Cardi B was going to be in a Nintendo game, it would be an LJN game. But it's pretty silly all the same.
So Outback Joey was part of, it's technically doesn't work on a Sega Genesis. You actually need the heartbeat system controllers. You can plug it into a Sega Genesis, but you have to have these specific exclusive to this heartbeat system to make it actually work and play. And so it's really bizarre. Very, very rare game. And the other thing is the manual. So I do have the manual to it, which is incredibly difficult to get as well.
So this is the old famous McDonald's CSI. Nintendo made these for McDonald's employees to teach them how to make their burgers. All of them are used, probably smell like burgers, and there are probably around 1,000 made.
Slightly before the nerd started, I began selling off a lot of my games. You know, a lot of it was I just needed the money. So I sold Contra for like $7 just so I could buy a sandwich, you know? So I'll never remember what that sandwich was, but I'll always remember Contra.